that way, as he gets here, oh, and Lily's getting here as well, we can get started. And I don't know if you have full control, but if everybody could enter like muted and video off, I think that would probably be best.
How do I do that?
I don't know. If not, it doesn't really matter.
Got it. Oh, I can disable waiting room. Should I do that?
Yes, that's probably just best.
Cool.
And I would say you can also get started. It's 11 people will join.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I think Greg is still connecting to audio. Should we wait?
Yep. We can see if there's a connection issue. Yeah. If not, I know some other people have class and stuff, so you can treat it the same way I did mine, which is basically like you're doing it alone, but with an audience.
Cool.
All right. Now we got Greg.
So Morgan and I are gonna walk you guys through his, I guess, quick tutorial on, well, the model he made for his quick tutorial on sort of some Rhino commands. Yeah, let's get started. And Morgan, let's tag team this because this is the model. Okay.
Yeah. I was going to start with as soon as you share screen.
Yeah.
It's important to understand that this is the model that I did for the modeling tutorial. This is not like a model that's been curated over the course of several weeks. This was curated over the course of several minutes in your guys' previous tutorials. So you guys have a lot more intentionality and a lot more kind of like working parts in your models. So this is going to be more of a workshop showing you the process, some commands that are super useful, and some things to keep in mind while you're drawing. This is not to say that the final thing that we come up with out of this model is the same as the drawings you guys have to come up with. You guys have many more hours in your Rhino files than this one has in it. So just something to keep in mind while looking at this model.
Yep. Okay, so first order of business, looking at the forms we have here, we are going to cut a section plane, so clipping plane. We have one set up here, but I'll just do this one really quick. So you have vertical clipping plane. Want to make sure we have it all in the correct direction. So this is the one we previously set up.
You can turn off and on clipping planes by going to preferences and clicking on your clipping plane and then clicking on the viewport you're in.
Yep. So we're going to go to the front projection, got it shaded, turn on that clipping plane, and we are in front. So now we see it is turned on. And then we are going to select just the model and hit make 2D. And
all the curves first.
Which?
The contour curves that are on it right now. You can just select curve and hide at least for the purposes of getting the make 2D. Probably something you all should do so that you don't end up with a bunch of extra lines potentially in your section as well. And then if you need contours, then we'll cover that here in a sec.
Yep. And maybe that's a useful command for you guys just in general. So what I just did was cell curve. So it selects all of the curves in the model. And I grouped them really quick and hit them. So another thing to keep in mind when you select from left to right and you have this blue box selection, means that you are only going to be selecting what is inside of this rectangle, and things that are outside of it will not be selected. Alternatively, if you go from right to left and you have this dashed box line, you're going to be selecting literally everything that it touches. So we're going to make 2D of this. And we want to make sure clipping plane intersections is on. Maintain source layers, which will help you sort of visualize the lines that are displayed when you make 2D. And then if you want hidden lines, but for our purposes right now, we don't need those. So hit OK. And then we go to top view, zoom selected, ZS will take you to the make 2D we just made.
And for whatever reason, Rhino selects clipping planes when it finishes the make 2D. So you do have to control click on the clipping planes in the file so that you can only have your drawing selected. And when you move the drawing, you're not also moving your clipping plane.
Yep. Good point. So I'm just going to move this up here because when I go to show selected, I know that there are a bunch of lines down here and we don't want overlaps. So, you know, here we have our make 2D. It is
super sloppy.
Very sloppy. There's, you know, some parts of the geometry that aren't complete, which we'll have to sort of improvise in cleaning it up. And you can see, you know, within things that are solid, we have a lot of geometry that we don't necessarily need. We have a lot of intersections. So basically, you know, I think one of the main points that Morgan and I want to bring up in doing this is how much time and energy is going to be spent in refining this, you know, base output from the make 2D into, you know, something that reads more intentional. So first order of business for me generally, we have all of our make 2D lines, which are automatically sort of grouped in their corresponding form layers. So if you turn off all make 2D, that's here. But a second level of, you know, sort of layer ordering here is there's a differentiation between curves and then clipping plane lines, which is what I turned on in the make 2D settings. So clipping plane is all of the objects that were intersected by the clipping plane itself. And then curves are everything that is behind. So when you turn off the curves layer, you're left with simply the geometry that we're cutting. And so generally I start with this just because, you know, we're talking about hierarchies, and the first layer of hierarchy is always the section cut itself. And so starting to clean this up will help to understand, you know, the lines that are inside of forms, inside of geometry that you don't need and that we're eventually, you know, going to be deleting and refining. So basically, I think what I would first do is, and this is also kind of a conversation about layer management that I wanted to bring up with you all. Generally what I do is make a layer called 2D drawings. And then I have a hierarchy under there, which start to indicate to me the different line weights that I'm eventually going to use when I bring things into the final product in Illustrator. So I usually set them up right away. So we'll have heavy lines, which is your cut line. We'll have medium lines, which is the level below. We'll have light lines, very light, hidden. I think that's a good starting point right now. So I usually change the colors of these, and this is something that I do across drawings generally, like across files. So I have my own kind of language that I've set up. And the reason I feel this is important is because once you start to like have this hierarchy of colors set up in your mind that you repeat across files, you'll start to be able to visualize through this very, I guess, conceptual, technical setup in Rhino, what it's going to eventually look like when you bring it into Illustrator and it starts to have physical line weights to it. So we are working on heavy at the moment. So I'm going to change everything to that layer. And already you're starting to like bring some of the lines outside of this very messy make 2D setup here. So you're already starting to create a kind of hierarchy, right? So in cleaning a lot of these things up, you know, while you're deleting lines that are unnecessary and trimming them, it's also an opportunity for you to start to resolve, you know, strange things that are happening, you know, within the model that you don't necessarily want to display in your drawing. So for example, here, there's a floor plate that's not congruent with, you know, the rest of the form. So in this instance, you know, I would start to move things down and match them up. Delete lines you don't need. Start to trim them.
And this is where basically you can just sift through your whole model and select your entire section cut series of lines here and
Yep.
just like trim and make sure that every single one of them is connecting to everything else. And like here at the bottom, a line just didn't show up.
Yep.
So we connect that, but then we realize that there's a gap space between these forms that didn't even touch.
Yep.
And so you have some extra lines to draw so that they connect, and then we'll trim out the in-between space.
Yep. And just start to improvise and use some of the lines that are present here in order to complete the forms. Trimming out, you know, moments like this.
And then we see like one of these weird little corners that you guys have as well. And so we just, in the drawing, we'll fix it. We'll say, you know, like these parts need to go so that this looks right or makes sense.
Yep.
And we just keep moving through until what we're going to end up with something that's exclusively made up of solid kind of filled space that's a continuous section cut like Jimenez has been asking for.
Yep. And then a command that's really useful for cleaning up these drawings is fillet, which generally is used to create, you know, an arc form between two lines. But if you use it in a way where you have the radius set to 0, it's going to act as a trim command. So for example, here, there's two lines that I could either choose to trim them this way, but you'll see in other instances, the fillet is more useful. Oops. Just select both the lines and it'll resolve the intersection using a 0-degree curve, which will make it a corner. And maybe I'll just demonstrate why that's useful. So if you have a line here and a line here that don't match up, one way to do it would be to extend, but then you have, you know, 2 orders of operations there. That kind of takes more time. The fillet will just do it for you.
And I mean, it may seem like such a little difference there,
Mm-hmm.
but if you have to like do those commands, extend or scale 1D, you know, 100 times, 100 times 2 seconds is 200 seconds, 100 times 1 second is 100 seconds. And it will make time up over the course of 4 sections and 4 plans, and you're down 15 minutes. And those small things add up really fast.
Yep.
Yeah, it's why, like, we also talked about how people select things, because Sam can select everything in type trim and then click each line, or she can drag boxes across where floor slabs are and like knock out both spots at once. And again, that kind of thing's gonna be the difference between taking, an hour to clean up a drawing or, 2 hours. And optimally, we'd like you guys to kind of be speed wizards at this by the end of things.
Yep. Okay. So what's the next point we should make? Probably curve boolean, because that will make a lot of your lives a lot easier. So
why don't we quickly just clean up the middle shape? Just the middle one, not the bottom or the top one.
This one?
I was gonna say the one above that one
Yeah.
that doesn't touch. Yeah. This
Okay.
one I think is like, if we just clean up this one and show how to curve boolean this section, then I think we'll be in a good spot.
Show how to curve boolean this section?
Yeah, like if we just trim out the insides of this one.
Okay.
Yeah. So quickly, Sam's just going to clean this up. She doesn't even really know what the heck I was doing when I did this, and to be frank, neither did I. This was just supposed to be a Rhino example, but she's just going to go through and make sure all the section cuts are connected, and that anywhere where these kind of weird points occur, she's going to delete them or trim them. And you can see here that she's kind of flying through it.
So, well, maybe this is why I was going to bring up curve boolean now, because
Yeah.
I mean that could be like super useful for you all. Curve boolean is sort of like an outline command. One thing to note that's really important here is this this portion here, delete input. You never want it to have, say, none, or maybe you do sometimes strategically, but generally you want to say used, and that means it's going to delete all of the lines that you use to make this outline, which will make sense in 2 seconds. So how you do it is you sort of like click inside of the portions of lines you want to make continuous and on the same layer. And because I'm on the heavy layer, all of the output is going to go directly to that layer. So here, all of these lines, they're going to automatically trim each other and be continuous. So I'll hit enter. And this is what we're left with. And there's not going to be any lines beneath it that we don't need to use anymore. And why that's important is because, maybe this line and this line were previously continuous, which we could have, used the trim command to clean that up. But because now these lines are, sort of foregrounded, we can just go in and delete these. So it kind of makes the cleanup process pretty easy. We can do it here as well for this grouping.
The bottom's not connected though, so it's going to do something. Yeah.
So I'm just going to select everything that I want to be continuous here. And so we have this output. And now like all of this is automatically trimmed, and I can just go in and delete them very quickly. There we go. Okay, so we have more or less our outline.
Our continuous section cut, which is really the first thing you guys should be handling in your sections and in your plans. This is not like something that is unimportant when we're talking about the plan either.
And then moments like these, which in the model, I'm not sure exactly what's happening, but in your final drawings, this is going to read as a solid, whether or not it's there. So something we want to do is just start to inference some potential spaces here. So we're going to offset this geometry, offset these lines, and trim them out. So we have a continuous cut line. And then artifacts like this, which happened from the offset, you're going to want to delete them and just smooth them out. Oops. Same with moments like this.
Yeah, like even if that's right in the model, it's wrong in the drawing.
Yep.
And those little moments do make a difference.
Yep.
We're looking for rationalized geometries.
Yep. I mean, even here,
Yeah.
it might make sense just to resolve that.
Connect them and delete. Yep.
Okay. So looking more or less correct. Maybe here.
Yeah. And again, Sam's doing this from a model that she's seen like for 6 seconds. That was never intended for drawing. So if we can turn this thing into something, your guys, you know, kind of documented and curated pieces are well capable.
Yep. Okay, so what I did was join everything. Now we have 6 closed curves and 3 open curves, which seems strange. So I'm going to do cell open curve.
Oh, and then
It's just this one. Okay.
yeah.
Cool. So next order of business is to get back into these, I guess, behind the cut lines. And something that I noticed immediately is the closeness of this cut line with, you know, some of the other layers in this Make 2D. So I'm just going to change that cut line so it's easily read and we know what is inside the form and what is outside the form, and what is outside of, you know, the cut, I guess, are things that we want to keep and articulate, and all the stuff that's inside are things that we want to delete and clean up. Use the trim command. Oops. And generally this takes a very long time.
I would say this is, yeah, the majority of the time that you're going to spend really cleaning is in part going to be doing this job.
Yep.
And
Deleting things.
but I would also say that it leaves the drawing like looking the cleanest of all the things that start to like clarify like what's going on.
Yep.
Which is why it's like super important that you do it well and consistently, because this is what's going to leave the project very, very, very clear. And really,
Make
we're
your lives
saying,
easier.
yeah, that with the addition of doing this and making sure that every section cut is joined inside of this like green area, it says that the thing you're working on is completely solid, and we don't have to ask questions about like, oh, that's a beam or that's a roof. How do they connect? Like that is important for what we're trying to communicate here, especially at the scale of these drawings. So we're really just looking for a consistent mass.
Yep. And it's just going to help you kind of understand what you're looking at, you know? When we look at a space like this, I mean, I can't even resolve it. So when you start to actually design the spaces yourself, you wouldn't want, you know, all of these things distracting you and getting in the way of your understanding of what you've made. This could be a while.
But in part, I think that even kind of showing how long this takes for this like mess.
Yeah.
Super good, because it's not like we know how long this takes. We've done it 100 times, and after we finish with a couple more commands and things of that nature, we're going to swap over to an old project file that Sam has pulled up and kind of show some plans that she's done in the past, where they came from and where they ended up, so that you guys can again see that this doesn't just apply to these shapes and organizations, but this is a process that you guys will follow moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's more or less kind of cleaned up.
Something you can do is, and I think Sam's basically done here, but as you're doing this process, just zoom in at the top of your model and work with the cut line selected in yellow. You can work your way all the way down the project looking for anything that's inside of the yellow.
Mm-hmm.
Slowly and methodically. It's a lot better than if you're like jumping around the project looking for like things that you missed, because then your eyes aren't focusing on anything particularly. And so that's a really quick way. Like there's one purple line inside of Sam's yellow line that's right there.
I don't see it.
It's north of your, or up on your mouse, move up, and then there, oh, you passed it now.
Oh, here.
Yep, that one. That's the last one. And now she's done. But it's common. It's easy to not see when you've been staring at the model forever.
Yep.
And so sometimes it's also good to get your teammates and your friends to like take a peek at what you're working on, because you can be like, hey, I've been staring at the same thing forever. Like, essentially, where are my spelling mistakes?
Yeah. And no matter how methodical you are with like this like order of operations, you're always going to miss things. So it's always useful to just like keep an eye out as you move on to the next order, whether you've missed things, and just, you know, continually clean it up, because it just takes a lot of refining.
So I think the next step is really, we can look at the list that order of operations for the list. The next thing I think is our
the dark
outline, and we'll explain that, and then we'll go through a bunch of commands, make sure we've covered those commands for you guys, and explain the order of operations.
Yep.
The dark outline, I think, is next.
Okay, so we're gonna do curve boolean again. And I'm just gonna close these briefly so that we get the right stuff. And maybe I'll make a new layer called outline and make sure I'm on that layer so the output goes directly there. Gold or something. Actually, yeah. So I'm going to select everything that touches air, basically, that touches white space in your final drawing. That is a problem. You want to make sure things are closed. So let's try this again. That's also a problem. Okay, we more or less have our outline. They're now on their own layers. And in the process, we lost the completion of our cut line. So we're just going to go back and do that again. And make sure that the curve Boolean.
And see how she swapped to the layer that the cut line is on so that it stays on the cut line heavy layer.
Yeah. So I'm just going to make sure that all of the heavy lines, all of the cut lines read above these outlines. So what that did was, you know, go back in and trim up, split up this outline. And that speaks to kind of the hierarchy that's created.
So first will come the section cut, then will come the dark outline. List kind of showing you what the next series of operations would be.
Yep. So you want the ground line always to be on that cut line. We want to make sure that it is continuous with the form. So
and
next,
then maybe, oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say maybe let's just explain the rest of the line weight sequence. And you guys are free to take a screenshot of this or type it out for yourselves inside of your Rhino model. But we have the section cut lines as the darkest. That goes for the plan cut lines as well. The outer dark outline, which we just did with the curve Boolean, followed by the object shape outer line, which Sam's going to point to here in a sec. Object shape inner line, that will be pretty clear as well. And then the furniture railing as the lightest, followed by your overhead dashes for things that are not visible in plan but are overhangs, and then curated hidden lines. So hidden lines you want to include, but have like a good reason to, because we don't want you guys showing all kinds of lines as you're doing this. So let's go look at where we would put our outer object lines and outer or inner object lines, and then we can talk about annotations and then just cover commands.
Cool. So I think this is a good place to start. This object, you know, this form here, this sort of piercing thing is intersecting into this form, and we have that intersection line here. So this grouping of lines defines the, I guess, the outline of this object. So I'm going to join them and put them on the medium layer because this is, you know, this is this hierarchy, the shape outer line. So I would go in and select lines that fall under that category here. And then something I do is called match layer, which is like a quick way of getting everything on the right layer. Once I have, you know, a set of lines that are already on the layer, the correct layer, and I say match layer. I'm actually going to change this color because it's not reading. Okay. So here, this is the edge of, I think this form is pointing down, so we have the edge there. Gonna match that layer. This is an instance where the edge of this form here is meeting the plane of this form. So that's an object outline.
And she's using the match layer command to match these lines to another line of a layer. And so she just selects the line, types match layer, and then clicks a line that's the same color she wants it to be.
And then here, this instance, we have, you know, what I presume to be a structural form piercing through here. So you want, I mean, this is its own object. So that's going to be an outline. And I have no idea what's happening here, so I'm just going to delete it.
Smart.
Join these. All of these define a form. Same here. This is useless.
I would say there's like, and I'm only now thinking of this, and Sam can correct me. But I would say it's good to be kind of ruthless with your drawings. Like it's be a harsh critic when you're drawing something, because and knowing that because it's in the model is not a good excuse or a good reason for something means that what you're left with is only the clear, concise, and like considered information.
Yep. That's a good point. I
And
mean,
so now I would say, even
looking
though,
at like moments like this, you know,
yep.
this wasn't visible when we had just the section cut line on its own. And I'm not sure what's happening here, but there's no need for it. So
she'll just extend the, yeah.
And there's like an artifact happening here, just delete that.
And so even though I guess we're not going to complete this drawing entirely, we're going to show some examples of object inner lines, which are these red ones here at the top that are inside of the object.
So that's gonna go on the light
your light line weight.
And
then at this point, assuming we went through and we changed all those to the correct line weight, we would proceed to go to furniture and railings and things of that nature. And it's noteworthy that if you have a railing that's being cut through that you've modeled, that should be a part of your section cut line as well.
Yes.
I don't have any railings in this, but those kind of objects would definitely include railings and the like. So she's going to put that on medium and then this line on light.
Yep. And then I guess it depends on sort of the hierarchy that you start to set up, but like generally I put railings on the light line weight, but because we have parts of the form itself on light, I'm going to use very light in order to draw handrails. So, I mean, this isn't to scale, obviously, but
yeah,
this seems mildly correct.
Yeah.
So start to draw them in. Maybe give it a little offset. And that's kind of all you need.
Yeah, I would say don't spend too much time thinking about handrails.
Yep.
Make them clean and
Just
concise.
a simple line to delineate the edge.
And then in terms of line weights, I think that that's actually all the weights that we had talked about.
Yeah,
so
we don't really have hidden lines, do we?
Not in this one. We're intentionally kind of leaving them out. I would say if you're on the edge between lots of hidden lines and no hidden lines is the way to go.
Yeah.
And so I think the next step is just to talk about the analytical lines. In the section, they're going to be your elevations and your maybe structural lines if you have very specific structural columns. But if not, don't include them. In this, these big black lines that are moving through would end up being dashed lines that just denote the direction of the structural columns in the project. And the elevations lines you see on the left there, you'll notice aren't touching the project. They leave like a gap between where they connect and the edge of the project. And they all line on the same side to describe the levels. And then we would do the text for those in Illustrator. But you do want to make sure that the heights are the same and that you're understanding that. On the last annotation line would be the section cut line for the plan. And we can figure that out, or figure where that is by just looking at where the clipping plane is right here in the top view. And see that clipping plane sticking out the left side. And we could just trace over top of it and then copy it to the plan over on the right there to draw where the section cut for our plan would be and which direction it would be facing. And this plan would get the exact same treatment that the section just got.
Yep.
We would start very, very messy and just work our way towards clean.
Yep. Constantly refining it.
Yeah. If you just look over, can you zoom in on the drawing line text just so I can double check we didn't leave anything out?
Here?
Yeah. Furniture, overhead dash, yeah. Curated headlines, section cut, elevation, structural property lines. For those of you doing property lines of your whole project on your independent parts, that can be done with the curve Boolean of your whole project. Drawing scale, we want to do in Rhino. And we just draw that as a 5 foot, a 10 foot, and a 15-foot line, or a variation on that at the bottom. Super minimal. Don't make it something that is a focal point of the project.
Yeah, and I mean, this is like way too large.
Yes.
Just because the scale of this model
project
is a little bit strange. You would want it to be, you know, a max if we're looking at like the relationship between the scale and the drawing. You know, it shouldn't be larger than this.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. One thing we were gonna talk through with you guys was we noticed something in cutting this plan. Basically that not everything was showing up. So we're just gonna show you the section command really quick.
So we're gonna do a make 2D here. And when we pull it out, you'll see that
maybe everything is here.
Everything worked in this one actually. But let's pretend if you just want to hide the clipping plane layer.
Oh, actually, it didn't.
You're hiding a visible versus curves.
Oh, right.
So the curves are there, but let's hide clipping plane for a second. So leave the visible curves and just hide the clipping plane. Make 2D layer.
Wait, what?
So it goes visible curves, and then under curves, there's another subfolder clipping plane. If we just hide that, we can explain the section command.
Okay. So, I mean, section command basically creates all the lines that would go on the clipping plane layer in your make 2D. So let's say you make 2D and not everything is here in this layer. What we're gonna do is go to either a front elevation or a right elevation, and this is the line of our clipping plane. We're gonna select all of these objects and type in the command section. And you're just gonna draw a line across on the same level of your clipping plane. And what that does is creates a set of curves that directly cut through the model at that datum line. And so this is a planar set of curves, and I'm just gonna move them down to the 0Z axis. And now we have all of our cut lines here. Is that what you meant, Morgan?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if your clipping plane lines didn't show up, we would just grab the ones that Sam just made and we'd put them
over
2D.
Yep.
And I know that other people have had issues with the clipping plane lines showing up even if they have clipping plane lines turned on.
Yep. And then one thing that Rhino does is like wherever there is a planar line that intersects the clipping plane there, it turns it into a point. So what I would do is like select all this output and isolate it, and then do select points, which is going to select all the points that are the artifacts of that and delete them. And now unisolate. So it's instantly cleaner. And then just, you know, you can move that onto here. And yeah, and then you would start the process of cleaning this up. Okay.
So we covered Boolean. We
Yep.
haven't really talked about select dupe, but we did cover with the section cut. Yeah.
Let's see. Let's say I have a rectangle, and for whatever reason, there's just like a couple of them on top of each other. So dupe will select everything that are all the lines that are on top of each other that are duplicated.
And that are absolutely identical. And it's important to clarify that, like, when we say identical, we mean if the program fit, like every single part of it is the same. If even one bit of it is different, it will not be selecting that line.
Yep. But you can see over here, like we brought, you know, some of these section lines over on top of the make 2D lines. And luckily Rhino is recognizing that. So you can just delete them. And you're left with only one. Trimming section cut.
We did that.
Okay.
Contour, I think, is the next one.
Yes. Okay, so contour, you can see we've done that here. Maybe I'm just going to copy this form over.
Yeah, I was just say we can just copy it over, or you can just use a sphere as an example or something.
Okay.
So if we were to do a make 2D of the section or the plan of the sphere, it's just going to be a circle, right? Which is pretty difficult for us to be able to tell what's actually happening without some kind of graphic indicator. And often you'll see people use shading, but we're not going to use shading for this. So in an effort to explain what's happening here, Sam's going to draw a line in the direction that she wants the object to be contoured in. And then she's going to type contour and make it so that when we make 2D this object, it will make 2D with lines as well. So she types contour, then clicks the direction that she wants it to go, which will be vertically. And then she'll type the distance between the contour lines, which we can make 1 foot or something. At which point it will contour it. And now if you go to like the top view, or just, yeah, whatever view the make 2D is visible, we'll have a bunch of contour lines. And I would advocate for making all your contour lines on their own layer.
Yeah.
They'll come in on their own make 2D layer, and you can make them even lighter or the same lightness than your furniture, because they're not real, right? They're just describing a curved surface.
Yeah.
And you can do that if you have a section. We can contour in the direction the section is looking at, in order to make those things substantially more visible.
Yep.
So I think we did extend. Did we do extend? I think we did extend.
Yeah. Scale 1D.
Yeah, again, making sure you guys are familiar with that. Join your lines, because lines and polylines are different. If you bring a polyline into Illustrator, it should come in all connected. If you bring a bunch of lines in Illustrator, it's very difficult to make sure everything is nice and clean. We covered section, and then.
And just one more point about the polyline versus line. I mean, I feel like curved Boolean is a great way to get there, and it's super quick, but the fact of the matter is, especially when you're dealing with hidden lines and like things beneath and like strange geometry, getting to a polyline, getting everything connected just takes a long time. But it's really worth it, especially when you're making them hidden lines, because you want all of the dashes in the hidden line to read as continuous. So if you have, something that's very broken up, the way that in Illustrator, the way that that turns into a hidden line is just going to be extremely messy. Okay. Selection process, we went over that.
I guess Smart Track and Snap are the last two, and then let's look at your significantly more complicated plans, and then we'll kind of call it.
Okay. This thing is in the way. So I have Smart Track on, and what that does is, say you're gonna start to improvise adding complexity into a drawing such as this. You generally want to like follow the lines of the form that you've already created. So for example, here we have a line that is at an angle, it's not orthogonal. And I wanna, make a line that continues from there. So what I would do is I would, put my cursor over this point that sort of tracks that intersection. And oops, maybe I'll do it from the midpoint. So you'll see with Smart Track on, I can follow the line even if it's, not necessarily connected to anything. And I can keep continuing until I click. And then have something that is perfectly contiguous with this line. And then OSNAP refers to these, I guess, selection options down here. And that basically, informs kind of like the immediate tools that will be available to you in Rhino. So if you have center line or center points turned on when you have a circle, and you want to draw a line coming from the circle, you're able to quickly snap to the center. Perpendicular, is super useful if you're drawing from somewhere randomly on space and coming into a form like this. Kind of search for, I don't know if you can find it, perpendicular lines like this, midpoints, tangents here. There you go. I think that's probably most of it. So now I'm just gonna quickly talk through a project that I did a couple years ago. This was a project for a library, and it was a structure studio with, form also involved. But basically, some of the main points I want to bring up here is that when I made this model and I made the structure, while I was thinking about interior ideas, I, didn't necessarily model it. In fact, I didn't really model it at all. And then, looking at this model, everything is on its corresponding layer and there's colors to it. And so when I go in to make this 2D, it starts to make things easier to set up. And there's already a hierarchy kind of implied in that. And so I'm gonna, just walk you through making 2D of a plan of this. So I'm gonna do a clipping plane and start with it, cut at the floor level, and then move it up 4 feet. Although for you guys, it's probably more useful to be just a little bit more inquisitive about the section planes that you cut. just going into, top view and assessing whether or not that's the right moment for you to be cutting through. So if you see weird artifacts, then, maybe you can kind of try to move things in a more strategic way. And I think that's more useful, I guess, in section. But basically, I'm going to go in and get rid of the site boundary because it's not necessary for this purpose, and it's going to confuse the drawing. And make 2D. Which isn't working. I've already kind of done that over here. And this was a moment where there were things in the model that were being cut that weren't showing up in Make 2D. So I kind of had to resort to the section cut, and you can see the differences between, what I get through section and what I get through Make 2D. So obviously this is incredibly, more useful. And something that I generally do is I keep my drawing files separate from my 3D files. So this is a final model, which, I don't typically have line drawings in. I typically have them on their own file. So this is one I used for the final. But, something that I kind of wanted to bring up with you all is the fact that all of what is inside here, all of the things that I've drafted in order to, differentiate between the spaces and do the spatial planning was done in 2D. And so none of this is modeled, and there's no use for it to be modeled because it lives, in two-dimensional space. And some of the ways that I started to delineate these spaces was by using, structural lines, which I have sort of drawn here. And you can see at, a couple different moments, I've used it to start to create walls, spaces, that sort of thing. And then, basically it's sort of the same process that Morgan and I already kind of walked you through. It's creating hierarchy. So this was a structure studio, so everything that was, responding, or everything that was an artifact of structure is differentiated from, the more sort of spatial architectural lines. And below that, we have light lines for, stalls and plumbing objects. These lines are above. This is an example of kind of some of the things that we talked about in class yesterday. So having a break line for the stair there, and you kind of continue the tread of the stair up, and beyond the break line, they take on the dashed lines. And you sort of cut some of the handrail details here.
And I think that's a really good example of the kind of thing that we don't want to include as extra. So we can include the handrails are worth including beneath the cut, but above the cut, they're not worth as hidden lines because at a fundamental level, it's like an over like saturation of information.
Yeah.
We understand they're beneath and we know they'll continue, but we don't know where the stair will end unless we continue the stair, and we don't know where the offset for the above aperture will be unless we show that. So just kind of thinking through what's necessary is a really good way to. We know that there's going to be a handrail if we've seen a handrail, but we don't know what the rest is going to be. So that's worth showing.
And yeah, that was actually a point I was going to make. If we look here at the Make 2D artifact I got, I mean, these stairs are actually modeled, but the way that it was cut is sort of like, I think if I just made this a plan right away, like it doesn't really do it justice. And so in 2D drafting, I resolved that. So I've actually continued the stair and been sort of strategic about where I place the break line. Like it doesn't have to, you know, actually make 100% sense. Yeah, and so, and then I drew what was above. That was not something I got from the model. This is something that I drafted. And then also here is perhaps an example of like some hierarchy that you can start to use to your advantage. I wanted to emphasize this stair, which is coming from this level and going up, which is, you know, spatially different than this stair, which is coming from the basement lower level onto this floor. And so these are two different line weights. What else? You can start to, in Rhino, differentiate layers for dashed lines, for door swings, and, you know, give some of your doors a little bit of depth to them. It'll just add a bit more to your drawings finally when you get them into Illustrator. And then having things, you know, on the correct layer once you go to export them. See. Oops. So you guys are doing 0.25, so 1/4 inch. And I think this is also an important point to make about exporting your drawings from Rhino. Depending on the units that you're using, you always want to make sure that this side equals 1 foot. And so here my units are in inches, so 12 inches equals a foot. So I'm going to export it for 12 inches to equal 1/4 inch in Illustrator. And then opening that up.
It's off to 0.
Yeah.
So a thing worth noting is that wherever you put your
That doesn't work.
Wherever you put your drawing Rhino compared to where the 0, 0, 0 point in Rhino is where it will be sent in Illustrator. So often I will move all my drawings to the 0, 0, 0 in Rhino, which I leave empty like always, so that I can export them correctly into Adobe Illustrator. It's just one of the quirks of going between these two softwares. And as soon as Sam's done with this, we'll be done with the kind of the drawing tutorial.
Yep. So I just wanted to make the point that, you know, here, once you get everything into Illustrator, basically just 2 seconds. I have heavy lines. I'll just leave them at 1 point for now. I have my medium lines, give them 0.5. I have this sight line, point, I don't know, 1.5 or something. Light, 2.5. And then when you make everything one color, there's already kind of a hierarchy embedded here. Obviously there's more work to do, but it's very quick once you have everything on the right layer. And I generally don't do any designing in Illustrator. It's just final product. I don't know. Does that cover it, Morgan? Morgan? Uh-oh, I think we lost him. I think that should do it. Do you guys have any questions?
I don't.
Okay. Cool.
I have one question regarding the strokes in Illustrator.
Sure.
So what strokes should we avoid, or which ones should we like use? Not the line weight, but when you go under stroke, there's like ways that your line could like edge, like this, it could either like be rounded or it could be like rough. Like which one should we use?
Let me see. So I don't usually mess with that, maybe because I have it set up to my liking, but so you're asking like about the edge condition here?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think rounded is probably better, because sometimes like this is a combined line, and I think what will happen if the corners are edged, I mean, that seems to work, but sometimes if you get sometimes if you have lines that are like at an extremely acute angle, and you have project, oh, it's not doing it. I don't know, I guess it's your preference. But I think for our level of viewing, I don't think it should really matter. I think you're not going to be able to tell the difference between something that has a sharp edge or something that has a rounded edge.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, okay, Lily. So Lily asked about making hidden lines read as continuous. And so this is an example of an above line here that I've joined in Rhino. So I'm going to make it a dashed line. And here you have all the options for, how the dashed line gets expressed. And you want to make sure that this is selected, aligns dashes to corners. Maybe this isn't a good example because it's rounded. Let's use this sight line. I'm going to make it a dashed line. And so because I have this selected, the dashes are going to turn the corner here. And if I have this other option selected, you'll see that it starts to break off. Doesn't do it so bad here, but if you're not in control of it, it can, lead to some wonky hidden line, kind of definitions. Yes. Anything else? All right.
Wait, can I ask if you have office hours like this upcoming Monday or something like that, or the
Yeah,
weekend?
yeah, I will on Monday. On Monday at 11.
Thank you.
Thank you for the tutorial, Sam and Morgan. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know what happened to Morgan. I think he lost his internet. Okay.
I don't know if you guys know this, but I'm actually in 2 meetings right now. It's kind of weird.
That's some serious multitasking there, Felix. All right, I'm gonna end the
I gotta
meeting.
head out.
And
Thanks, Sam.
yeah,
Thank
I will see
Morgan
you
for me
guys.
because I can't thank him.
I will.
Oh, what time would the recording be available, by the way?
Probably, I mean, at some point this afternoon.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.